Deputy Eamon Ryan.
Thank you very much indeed, Ceann Comhairle, and I'm very pleased and proud to follow the Taoiseach and Taoiseach in setting out our thoughts on this budget, which was a collective effort, which I think was an example of government working well together. You have differences, you have difficulties, but you knuckle down at this time because our job is to protect the Irish people, and that overcomes any immediate political differences. That is something that should unite us, does unite us, and I hope unites, and I think it does unite this House. We don't differ on that in this crisis. So I don't believe there's a difference of opinion here in terms of, I haven't heard someone saying that it hasn't been the correct approach here to borrow from the future, to borrow from our children, I suppose, or from the future years to protect our people now. Not only is that right on the principle of protecting our people, but actually it also, fortunately, is a prudent economic approach. It is the actual proper economic strategy to take in a crisis time like this, when people are fearful and private spending contracts and investment stops, that the state does invest and borrow and invest for the future, which is what we're doing. But first, it is important to protect our people in the here and now, and that's why that further significant €4 billion increase to our health system, I think, is absolutely appropriate, both going for immediate COVID measures, but also going for strengthening and improving our health system in a way that will have long-term implications, will give long-term benefits to our people in the form of additional capacity, additional beds, and also hopefully additional skills and new ways of doing things that help us manage to the immediate crisis, but also protect us into the future. It was also particularly important, I think, in this budget that we did think in the widest sense of our health budget, or looking after protecting our people. And in that context, our party was particularly pleased that there was a significant increase in the funding that's being made available for disabilities, our people with disability in our country. I think that's something that's an aspiration, or that's an interest that's shared with all parties in this House. But it was important that we actually delivered on it, and now it's important that that money is spent wisely and well, so that this Republic of ours is defined in the way that we really do look after every citizen to the best of our ability to bring out the most of their abilities. And similarly, in terms of where we seek to invest in health, and there are obviously a whole series of different policy priorities, implementing the national maternity care and other strategies are a real key. But I think there's also agreement in this House, and broad welcome, and certainly our party was very pleased that we've been able to give that additional €38 million allocation to mental health. And I think particularly at this time in a crisis when people are fearful, it is actually mental health that's probably suffering more than anything else, and the one that we need to protect most. The second protection that I think is delivered in this budget, and it's not an easy one, but it's a key one, is protection against poverty. It's particularly not easy in this time when jobs are lost, when incomes are uncertain. But I believe there are a series of measures in this budget, particularly on the greener aspects of it, that fundamentally meet that objective. The way in which the carbon tax has been introduced this year and has been set for the next 8 to 9 years in the legislation agreed last night stitches in a security that it will be poverty-proofed, that we will actually make sure that the revenues are ring-fenced in a way that it will not lead to a deterioration in the fate of those, particularly on low income, who suffer from the prospect or do suffer from fuel poverty. I think it was very significant what Michael McGrath said yesterday in terms of that. This clearly, demonstrably government position. This is not a tax to raise revenue. It is one to give a signal that we need to make a switch to a cleaner, less polluting way in how we spend our money, what energy systems, what transport systems, what industrial systems evolve in our country. But it is clear, it is agreed, it is now set as custom, which will be repeated year in, year out in any increase in carbon tax, that 1/3 of the revenue, roughly, will go towards protecting against poverty. And that's, I think, hugely important, hugely significant. I think the way that it was done yesterday in terms of targeting the qualified child allowance, the living alone allowance and the fuel allowance is the best and right mix of particularly targeting those suffering from extreme poverty at the lower end of the income distribution chain. Added to that and helping that was the huge investments that were committed to yesterday, also coming from the carbon tax and other sources, towards protecting people from fuel poverty in a much more fundamental long-term way by giving them the option of not having to burn fossil fuels, not having to spend revenues that are tight on fossil fuels, but instead giving them warm and healthy homes, which we all know is probably one of the greatest comforts if you happen to live in one, which is actually the best protection against poverty, the best way of improving health. So the fact that that huge increase in money for retrofitting, 2/3 of which was targeted towards social housing and people in lower income households, is a second major protection for people who might be vulnerable in this country for fuel poverty. It is of huge significance. And if we can deliver over the next 20 years, and that's the project, it has to be a 20-year project, a €50 billion project, where we go to every single Irish home and carry out this strategy, which is a sensible, intelligent, not divisive, I don't believe, strategy, where every single Irish home is fit for this cold climate of ours. What an outcome that would be for the people of our country. No fuel poverty, much healthier outcomes in terms of people's asthma, cardiac, every health condition radically improves when you're living in a warm and comfortable home. And it's not beyond our bands of doing that. We're starting it with Simon Harris by training up 1,500 apprenticeships with skills in the area, and that will grow and expand. That's a doable, achievable project for the next 4 to 5 governments. I don't believe it's one that now will change because it makes such sense. It will be popular and will be successful, and it will be adopted by the Irish people as more houses do this, putting the insulation, putting the solar panel on the roof, putting the heat pump by the side. That's a winning combination that we can do. Our companies are good at this. Our workers will be very good at this. And our households will like this, and we started that in this budget here yesterday. A further protection offered in this budget, or presented in this budget, was to the very security, particularly of a lot of our younger people. Roderick O'Gorman, having got huge advances in the July stimulus to support the childcare sector, has targeted and focused the additional budget supports he has, particularly the protection of younger people. In that huge increase in the budget for TUSLA, we seek to protect the most vulnerable young people who often need really intensive care and support from our state when they are in difficult circumstances. That decision to further widen that sense of who we seek to protect by bringing in young people from refugee status, others coming from real traumatic different circumstances, and saying that we will invest as being part of a country which has international obligations, which recognises those, which sits on the Security Council, not just to expand our own immediate short-term interests, but to espouse a form of unilateralism that this world, multilateralism, rather, that our world needs at this time. It was important we backed that up by increasing our overseas aid budget, but also by saying we will look after those young people who are in greatest stress and difficulties on our far distant shores of Europe, and we will give them a safe refuge and welcome here. Less noticed, but I think was important, was the money that's going to be invested in our young people, particularly those who are just starting in third level and who find themselves actually in an experience where they're going to college, but there's no sense of collegiality. There's no sense of connection, and that's a real problem. So for that grant, that support for students to try and provide that connectivity, try and encourage the colleges to not just do recorded online Zoom lectures, but actually start trying to provide connectivity in whatever way we can to the students so that their college days or apprenticeship days or learning days are not lost. That was important in my mind as a statement of where we want to go. And we know that this government's 3 key aims, invest in health, invest in housing and invest in climate, The other key measure for young people in yesterday's budget was the commitment, was the additional funding to roll out housing, social housing, cost rental housing and private housing and supports in a variety of ways. I believe is also a critical way of which we can protect particularly our younger people, protect in the sense of having a viable future, having a sense you can settle down, raise a family because you know you will be able to build and create your own home. That is critical. And that's where, in making strategic decisions, and there were difficult decisions because there are some areas that anyone could rightly argue should have got further funding, but I believe we're right to stick to that core mission of this government: invest in health, invest in housing, invest in climate, and make this moment a one of change where there's real challenge and real difficulties, but actually use it as a turning point to deliver that more secure future for our people. The budget also invests significantly in protecting nature and starting doing that in a way that we know in the ultimate security for people will not be guaranteed unless we address the biodiversity and climate crisis we face. I was very glad that my colleague Malcolm Noonan has seen, and I don't think he's set out the details yet, but a significant increase in the National Parks and Wildlife Service and in his area. We need that attention to the protection of our land, of our nature, of our natural systems. We are connected to it, we are not separate, we are all enriched by a return of biodiversity. We urgently need to undo and reverse the dramatic loss of water quality and loss of biodiversity on our island in the last 50 years. And Malcolm, I think, is in a key position there and has been well resourced to help expand and encourage and support the National Parks and Wildlife Service as they set about that task. The third area for allocation from the carbon tax, which set now, I believe, in our programme for government, and I would find it hard to believe that any future government wouldn't follow such a similar course. The three areas of investment is in social protection through the welfare system, through investing in retrofitting our buildings, and the third area is in the restoration of biodiversity in our agricultural systems. And that's what was delivered yesterday. It was a significant moment in the history of the Green Party in my mind, because Pippa Hackett and Charlie McConalogue now have a budget which we can focus in asking farmers to actually engage their real skills and expertise in habitat creation, in restoring nature in their own corners and right place within the fields of their farm. And that is going to grow, and that is going to actually have a profound consequence, in my mind, for the long-term future of our country and our young people going into farming. It will give them skills, it will give them a key role in these great challenges of our time, and it will give them an income as they do so. And it did not stop there. Various measures set out by Minister Hackett this morning, because it isn't just that habitat creation, it is a radical improvement. About 500 new organic farmers we expect to go into operation next year, thanks to this budget. The 50% increase in the horticultural budget, which we know we need to do, stop importing all our horticulture and start growing it ourselves. We can do this at home here. 50,000 farmers who are going to benefit by new biodiversity, health and safety training. This is thinking long-term. This is thinking investing for the future, really upskilling our farmers and giving them a central role in actually how we tackle this biodiversity crisis, and doing it in a way where it's really sophisticated, smart farming. And that's where farmers are going. That's what they're already doing. That's what they're stepping up to do. Further investment, along with the investment that's in my department from this funding for 4,000, the rehabilitation of 4,000 hectares of peatland. That's the best, most efficient way of storing carbon. That's the way we can meet this 7% target, is learning from this first steps and then scaling it up. Restoring peatlands, 20% of our land. That's where we can actually meet the climate targets and do so in a way that protects biodiversity, creates employment, pays farmers for that key job, that really important skilled work that needs to be done now. National Soil Survey, going to 16 sampling systems, 16,000 farms as part of this Smart Farming Development Initiative to actually get down really local. That's how we will meet these climate targets, is in such scientific, as high-skilled, nature-based farming. That's going to be the future And that was what was committed to in the budget yesterday, why I was particularly proud of that section of the many changes in which we were able to see real change. Also in that funding, the funding of the National Land Review, committed to in the programme for government, which will be centre stage and critical to the future of forestry in a country, to the future of farming, and I believe to the future of rural Ireland. That's at the centre of any land use review, of any land use plan. It's a plan for how we can create jobs for young people right across this country in a much more balanced, stable, secure way, where they're well paid for these vital skills. That is the green recovery that is ahead of us. That is what has been funded in this budget. That gives confidence in my mind that we can do it, that we can actually do it on a step-by-step basis, where going green is good for our people. That's what we have to seek to achieve. It's not a cost, it's not a burden. It has to be a better way, a better future for all the people of our country. We will do that as well as in energy. I mentioned retrofitting earlier on, but also in the area of transport. And it will take time, because it takes time to build transport systems. It takes time to get through the planning system, but we're starting. And there's a clear obvious sense of direction in 2 or 3 ways. Firstly, it requires electrifying everything. If we're going to zero carbon in transport, it has to be removing the diesel, removing the gasoline, removing the gas, removing any fossil fuels, and use our own renewable electricity instead. That's why we're going to support the taxi industry with the scrappage scheme, which allows them to convert to these really high-quality new cars which will start coming in the market. That's why there's this historic order coming from Irish Rail, so that our rail train carriages will be run by electric and electric battery rather than by diesel. That's why there are changes to the VRT system to make it cheaper and easier to switch to these new cars. It's not there as a punitive, it's not there as a revenue-raising measure, it's because we have to do it in international law, but also we want to send a signal that it's cheaper and easier to do to make this leap towards an electric transport system. There's one trend in the transformation in transport is electrification. The other, in my mind, is the restoring back to the local. This whole opportunity that comes out of this cursed COVID virus, that you actually can have this restoration of life back to the centre of the local village, town or city suburb. That 15-minute city concept, where it's not all about what we've seen in this country for decades and ever-lengthening commutes, ever further sprawl, ever longer time stuck in traffic, which is not good for anyone's wealth or health or happiness. Instead, to try and bring life back and bring jobs back to the local area and create transport systems based on local active transport systems. And that's what we've committed to in this budget, €360 million in that project, which is only a start, but which will transform, in my mind, every village, every town, every rural area, every city, making it safe to walk or cycle to school, meaning that you don't have to necessarily commute all the time. We can do remote working. We don't have to all the time be driving longer distances. There is one small project I might refer, well, 2 I might refer to in that regard, one within my own department, one being delivered by Minister Heather Humphreys. The National Broadband Plan is now on track, on target, and if anything, we're going to accelerate it to deliver it quicker than was planned, because the demand for it now is clear, that everyone has to have that high-speed broadband connectivity. Minister Heather Humphreys, in one key project, this Town First policy, putting in broadband connection points so we can create remote working hubs. The last point I want to make, the last protection, what this budget in my mind is also all about, is further to that sort of project Heather Humphreys has, the idea that actually we need to protect small Irish business in this time, small Irish employers and their workers. Most people working for the public service will be able to get through because our wages are still paid every week. Most people in the large foreign direct investment companies are also, as the Taoiseach just said, doing well in this difficult time. The sector at risk is the small Irish business, family business, small local business. And this budget went big in every way we could. We've done the EWIS, done the PUP payments, and now this new CRIS payment to help companies in real particular difficulty. I think that's strategically the absolutely right, most important first priority at this time. Because if we don't have that heart of our economy, we won't be able to pay for all the other measures. If we don't get that, protect those family businesses, people's mental health will not be able to take the loss from the pride that they get in those businesses. And it's that initiative, that measure, is which I'm glad to conclude my comments on Budget 2021.
Thank you very much, Minister Ryan.